So today I'm going to introduce you to the new pandemic hobby of winemaking, because man cannot live by sourdough alone. It's also a yeasted product. I feel like it's a good fit. So the first thing you need is grapes, which I have Concord grapes, which most people would tell you aren't wine grapes, which they're not, but you can make wine out of pretty much anything. And I've made Concord grape wine before. The recipe that I use is from, honestly, I can't remember what website it was from, but it was Grape Stomper, maybe, but it's a 5-gallon recipe for Concord grape wine. And basically you need 25 pounds of grapes, about 10 to 13 pounds of sugar. You need your primary fermenter, which is a 6-gallon container, because you need extra space for the fermentation. Otherwise it'll blow out the top if you have a fermentation vessel that's only the size of your batch. So the first thing that you do when you're starting any batch of wine is to sanitize your equipment, and for that you use sodium metabisulfite or Camden tablets, and you crush 5 tablets in a mortar pestle and dump it into a gallon of water, and that's your sanitizing solution. Then you coat everything that your wine is either going to be in or your wine will go through. So any of the tubing that you use when you need to rack it, or anything that you're putting into your wine, like your hydrometer, your flasks, all that stuff, you need to sanitize it first. So you rinse it all down with your sanitizing solution, and then you let it sit for 10 minutes, and then you rinse it off. So I've already rinsed everything with Camden solution, and now I'm going to rinse everything with cool water, and then we'll move on to the next step. So now I'm going to weigh out my grapes. Like I said, I need 25 pounds. So I'm going to weigh it out like 5 pounds this shit at a time, and then I'm going to put them into my primary fermenter, and I'm going to smash them up a little bit with a potato masher. And you kind of want to do it in batches, because if you wait and smash them all up at the start, then if you weigh in all 25 pounds and then try to smash them, there'll be too much in there and you won't get a good mash. And you know, you don't need to pulverize them, because the fermentation won't do that for you, really. You just need to smash them to release the juices. Try to burst all the skins. And with Concord grapes, it'll be a red wine, and the red wines you leave the skins in. So there are your 25 pounds of grapes. And like I said, you just mash them up a little bit. So the grapes that I'm using, Concord grapes, are, they slip skin. So the skins just come off the grape bodies. But like I said, since we're making a red wine, we're leaving the skins in. But we just want to make sure that all the skins are kind of split. And you don't need to use your feet. You don't need to stomp them. Just make sure everything is good and broken up in there. Make sure your hands are clean too, of course. All right, so next step is to add in sugar and water to fill up the container. And the recipe that I'm using, I have to go and get it. It's 10 to 13 pounds of grapes until you get a reading on a hydrometer of a certain amount. That and the hydrometer is what the amount of sugar in the start of the wine, as measured by a hydrometer, is what tells you how much alcohol you'll have when the wine is fully finished. So the more sugar, the more that the yeast has to ferment, and the higher your ABV will be at the end. So let me go grab my recipe and I will be right back. Right, so here's the recipe, and there you can see the starting specific gravity. That's what you're measuring with the hydrometer. It's going to be 1.13 to 1.23, and that gives you a potential alcohol of 15 to 16 ABV. So we're going to just start with dissolving 10 pounds of sugar in 2 gallons of water. We're going to add that to the primary fermenter, and then we're going to measure the specific gravity on the hydrometer, and we'll see if we need to add more sugar from there. All right, so I've added in the 2 gallons of, the 10 pounds of sugar dissolved in 2 gallons of warm water, and now I'm just stirring it around with the grapes. And the next step is to test our specific gravity at this point. So what we need for that is a tall glass. I used to have a graduated cylinder for this purpose, but I don't know where it is. It's either at my parents' house or in my basement. But you can use a tall glass too. But do make sure that it's clean and sanitized before you put it in your wine. You never want to put soap in your wine because it will ruin it. So anything that you're using for your wine, you don't want to put soap on it to wash it. You always want to use the sodium metabisulfite. So what you want to do now is just put your glass in, and you want to get the liquid into the cup. And you really don't want the fruit in there because it just gets in the way of what you're doing, because you really only care about the liquid right now. So you've got your must, and you've got your hydrometer. So try to get this to focus right. Sorry. My hands are all gooey now. I don't want to touch my phone. Okay. So the scale that you're using is right there. So when I said this one, thank you. When I said that we want it to be between 1.13 and 1.23, that's right from right there to right there. And that gives us a potential alcohol of 15 to 16%. So how to use this hydrometer is to float it in a glass of your must. And it's not quite deep enough, so I need to get some more juice. You want to make sure that it's floating freely, not sitting on the bottom of your container, which mine is now. And you just look at the line that it's floating at. And currently, I am at 1.25 or so. So I am a little bit heavy on sugar, so that means that I should add a little bit more water and test it again. And it's fine to use tap water to start your wines. Make sure you stir it around really well before you test it again, because you want to make sure that all the sugars are dissolved and everything is well distributed so that you're getting an accurate reading. All right, now I am right in the middle of my sweet spot for sugar content. So I'm gonna put that back in. And our next step is to sanitize the must and add in the rest of our additives. So for this particular, oh darn it, I didn't refocus. Okay, sorry about that, guys. So to this must, we're going to add in yeast nutrient, pectic enzyme, and crushed Camden tablets. So we are adding the yeast nutrient to give the yeast something to eat besides the sugar. It just helps it to be more robust. Then the pectic enzyme is for specifically for Concord grapes and other table grapes, because they have pectin in them, and it leaves an undesirable deposit in your finished wine. So you put in the pectic enzyme to break down the pectin so that you don't get that, because you don't want jelly. The pectin is great for making jelly, it's not great for making wine. And then the crushed Camden tablets are to sanitize everything. So we're not adding our yeast yet. We need to add the sodium metabisulfite and the other additives and then wait for 24 hours before we add the yeast, because if we added it now, the sodium metabisulfite would kill the yeast, but we wait 24 hours and then it's safe to add the yeast. So we're going to go ahead and add in the amounts of the additives that are in the ingredient list. So for our yeast nutrient, it's 5 teaspoons. And this is the yeast nutrient that I'm using. I got it from Amazon because I used to have a wine store around me, but unfortunately they are out of business now, so gotta go with the Amazon. So I only have a half teaspoon, so I'm just gonna put in 10. And then we're going to put in the pectic enzyme. And that is 2.5 teaspoons. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to crush our 5 Camden tablets. In there. And we're going to stir it all up. And then you take your lid and just pop that on there. And you don't need an airlock right now because it's not going to ferment because there's no yeast in there. You're just sanitizing it. But I'm going to put one on just because there's a hole here and keep anything out of it. So here's the airlock. It's 3 pieces. And then you fill, so you have the cap that goes over the stem in there and then the lid on top, and you fill this up with the sodium metabisulfate solution. And then you just push it into the hole. And then when the yeast is added and it starts fermenting, that's where the gases will bubble out of. And then the sodium metabisulfite keeps anything from getting in there that would spoil the batch. So now we're going to wait for 24 hours and then we'll add the yeast and then it will start fermenting.